Step into the realm of daring ideas and transformative dialogues. This is Voices from the Edge, the podcast that pushes boundaries and ventures beyond the ordinary. Here, we confront the crucial issues that shape our world today. From the heartbeat of community challenges to the untold chronicles of leadership. From the relentless pursuit of social justice to the essential lessons in safety and lifelong learning. Voices from the Edge takes you to the crossroads of change. Because the edge is not just a boundary, it's where growth happens. It's where the real conversations begin. So lean in, be inspired, and let's explore what lies beyond the edge.
And today's guest is Lance Burdett. Lance, how are you?
Good, mate. Good, Tom. Yourself?
Oh, I can't complain. What's it like over in New Zealand at the moment?
Where I am, it's hot and dry. It hasn't been like that for a while, though. We've had a bad year with weather and with all sorts, actually. But yeah, it's not too bad today. The sun's out. I'll be going for a bit of a jog later on. I used to run, but now I jog. In fact, I think I could go for a fast walk. Bit old for that stuff, but yeah, I'll be going out there and getting some rays.
Just curious, because of New Zealand's reputation, is hot and dry bad weather?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, it's Auckland, and Auckland that you get four in a day, right? So you take your sunnies and you all the repellent and the hat, and you take a raincoat. It's literally like that in an afternoon. So people go to watch the footy or the cricket, and you'll see them with all their sunscreen and the sun hats and the sunglasses and a raincoat or an umbrella. But we've been pretty lucky. We're pretty good over here because it's a small, thin island. We're getting lots of flow, cold air hitting hot air. So we're pretty lucky, to be honest.
Yeah. All right. Lance, you've got an extensive background in New Zealand police, both in witness protection, which is an interesting topic itself, negotiation, liaising at the London Olympics for the New Zealand team, detective inspectors. What else we got? A national advisor on negotiation, intelligence manager, and a police emergency call centre inspector, a manager. Yeah, that's quite extensive.
Yeah, I get bored, Tom. I get bored.
Oh, you're not the only one. I feel
I've sort of got undiagnosed ADHD. And you just go look through my report cards. My mum, bless her, she kept all my report cards, and I went looking through them the other day, and holy hell, won't sit still, disruptive in class, needs to pay attention, a stern discipline required. And that's just in the first couple of years. So I've achieved a lot, but I get bored. So the longest I spent anywhere in the police was with witness protection, and I loved it. And I used to come across the ditch to Australia, and we had conferences, in each state. Love that job. It's just fantastic. We ran the VIP protection side of it in Auckland, the biggest city. But we also ran witness protection for the country. So I ran the team that did that, the practical aspect. So we had somebody at headquarters doing all the paperwork, and I'm out there with guns and playing around. So it was just the most enjoyable job in the police, I have to say, yeah. So the crisis negotiating goes alongside. We don't have a fully dedicated crisis negotiation team in New Zealand Police. So we are all volunteers who train, and then when we get called out, we drop what we're doing and off we go. So yeah, it's an unusual. We don't have a full-time advisor. That's a part-time role as well. So you're balancing 2 or 3 hats always. But my passion was helping people, and getting in front of them and talking them off that bridge. There's no other feeling like it, Tom, when you save a life. They don't thank you for it. That's not what it's about. But I remember coming away from one, and I got stopped by a traffic patrol. And he says, "Do you know what speed you were doing?" And I was in uniform. I said, "No, but I reckon it was fast." He said, where you going to? I said, "To where I've come from." I said, sorry, mate, I got too much adrenaline in my system. He said, oh, have you just done that job up the road? I said, yeah. He said, good on you. He said, follow me. So that I stick within the speed limit. It's such a cool experience. It really is. And, I've been very lucky. I never had one that went wrong. So, sometimes you need to get the team, the armed defenders to go in there. But most never lost anyone. And that's I guess I'm one of the lucky ones.
Yeah. What's the basis of successful negotiation?
It's really getting them to think about the moment where they are right now. That's what it comes down to. There's nothing more than that. There's a whole lot of technicalities to it, which I think we spend too much time on. So I think of it as what's going on, how did you get there, let's get you out of the situation. So that I break it down to those 3 steps. So what's going on? Obviously something's happened, and it's always the last 24 to 48 hours, something has triggered the desire, right? It's built up over years, or it could have built up over hours, depending on the person. But there's something that has just said, that's it. But the thing is, we're there talking with them, so they haven't quite got, it's not the gumption, they just haven't, they still have hope. And that's why we're there. So you talk with them about what's happened, but how did it all start? And then you take them back and then you find out, so what's kept you going? You've been through a lot. And that's what you focus on. It's called the hook. And you keep talking about that. And as you're talking about it, you're reminding them of the special times. And I now know through the work I do through neuroscience, dopamine's produced in the brain. And dopamine is a powerful motivator. We used to think it was a reward for good behavior, for good thoughts. It's not. It's a motivator. And in fact, what the neuroscience is showing now is it builds a connection, a new pathway. It's called a synapse connection. So we talk about what's kept you going, and you get to a point where you have to come up with a midway point. Because when somebody's in strife, they want to kill themselves, right? But they haven't yet done it, thankfully.
Yep.
But then to get them back, for them, feels like a failure. I couldn't take life, so I tried to kill myself. Now you're convincing me that it's going to be okay. How do I get my leg back over, or how do I put the knife away? So the way I did that was I broke it down into, so how about you just turn around and face me first up if they're on a bridge, and they always face out. Well, how about you just turn around? And so I always made sure I stood 90 degrees off and get them to talk. I can't quite hear you. Can you lift your head up? And as soon as they lift their head up, it's called change position. And they look at you. You got them. Yep. And that's exactly how it. And so you talk to them and say, look, I don't want you to straight away come over. Do you mind just wrapping your arm around because I'm a bit scared. So you show your vulnerability. I'm a bit scared of where you are. And then it's about, look, why don't you, I'm not going to help you because I don't want to come near because, I'm just as scared as you are. Why don't you just sit on the road and I'll sit beside you and we'll chat. Mm-hmm. So you break it down to that halfway point. And I've done that many times. And you just sit there and, spin a bit of a yarn, and 5 or 10 minutes I say, well, there's ambos. There's an ambulance sitting over there. How about we go and have a chat in there? And they're away.
Yep.
Shake and take, I call it.
Fantastic. Listen, I'm really old school, and some of the myths that I think I've heard a lot of in the past is that if people have got to that point and they haven't carried through, it's basically because they don't want to go ahead. They don't want to go ahead and complete the act. They want to be talked out of it. Is that actually accurate, or is that just a load of nonsense?
It depends on the person, and this is the thing, right? So some people will wait, and this is why we call them TPIs, third-party intermediaries. They'll ask for somebody to come to the scene, right, mum or dad or whatever, and then they'll do the deed when they get there. Mm. This is for you. So you've got to be careful how you handle it. So you can actually say the wrong thing. So you've got to be very mindful of all the words. You slow things down. It's a hell of a, I call it the long, lonely walk, Tom, on the way to when you're walking towards the person. It's a hell of a lonely, what am I going to say? What if they do this? What if they do that? So yes, they haven't quite done it yet, but that's not to say they're not going to, because there's a lot of, we've seen it time and time again where they've actually, no, that's it, I'm done. You can't convince me. And we had one terrible tragedy in Auckland here where the incident cars turned up immediately, and they were talking with this person. And we have a particular model where we do this. What's going on? And he just said, "I've been doing this for 2 hours. I'm not going through this shit again." And off he jumped. So it's a hell of a But that's not a bad guide. That's not a bad guide. If you can get in front of them, they don't. Yeah, because a lot of it these days is done out of pure rage. It used to be out of deep sadness. Our brains have changed significantly, and now, and I had a very dear friend of mine who, thankfully, is still here. But I was talking to him one day, and I said, what tripped you over the edge? He said, I got this letter saying that they were going to investigate me, and they had a hellish time with an organisation and that he worked with. We're going to investigate you, and we're going to do all sorts of things with you. And he just said, I'll show you, you bastards. And he, jumped into the car and turned the motor on, and luckily somebody came home and stopped him. So, yeah, no two people are the same, Tom. We all have different experiences, and some people have had some, a bit of a shit life, and that stuff builds up. That stuff builds up, and when it builds up, and you get into the depths of, the brain and how it works. The brain has a negativity bias, looking for negative things, and whenever our amygdala, that's the fight or flight, sparks up, it puts a mark in your memory as a reference for the future. So if somebody's had 3 or 4 or 5 incidents in a short span, the brain will focus on only those, so they can't see the positives. They can't see, like you and I are talking now. We're having a bit of a joke before we started. I have a bit of a potty mouth too, for those that are watching. And so we were talking about, straight up talking. You can't really do that with somebody. You've got to be on your game, but doing what we're doing now, trying to engage with the person, because they've lost so they feel hopeless and helpless. And that's a true thing. So you help them help themselves by reminding them of the hook. So what's kept you going? What's got you here? You're here, you're talking with me, and you thank them for it. And this is how it works. And so that's the way you just, unlike a barricaded, armed offender who's locked in a house and probably drunk and won't come out and play, and you bore them out. You've got to be very careful with what you say to somebody who's vulnerable. They are vulnerable, and it doesn't take much, because they're in that whole negative space, and all they can see is their life being negative. But and that's the way the brain has gone. They call it the worry spiral. There's all sorts of catastrophizing. There's all sorts of names for it. But basically, the brain is in the bad part, right? So I wrote a book on it called Dark Side of the Brain. And that's where we get to, in that dark patch where it says, here's a way out. It's an extreme state of fight or flight. You fight, you fight, you fight, and the brain says, here's a way out. It's just an idea. I had them. So I had depression in the police, and I was really unwell. Fell down this massive hole, and I looked out the window once. It was on the 4th floor of the police station, believe it or not. I was photocopying, detective inspector photocopying. This is the police, right? And the bloody machine kept breaking down. It was invented by a man. And I was like, oh, this is all I need. And I looked out, and I had this thought pop into my head and said, you've got to go higher. And it was it was lucky. I had just become a crisis negotiator, and it was such a real thought. And so that gave me a glimpse into what it was like. It shook me to the core. And so I went and got help immediately. Yeah, I was one of the lucky ones.
Okay, just a question on that, because I am fairly ignorant. I have my own beliefs, but not backed up by anything. are we seeing, in your opinion at least, are we seeing more people, firstly, attempting to take their own lives? And secondly, are you seeing, or what do you believe that you're seeing more outward aggression to people in everyday life, in personal interactions?
It's great question. The answer is yes and yes. And it started in 2020 with lockdown. So I've done a lot of research on this for my latest book called, I don't even know what it's called, Anxiety is a Worry. And it's a phenomenon that happens whenever we go through something major, a major event. And so we were asked, depending on where you live, to stay at home, change your whole lifestyle. Don't talk to people. Don't talk to your neighbour. Isolate yourself. You'll be safe. Oh, get a few jabs, all that sort of stuff. And you got to do this and you got to do that. And our brain went, what? So the brain looks to the future. So while I'm talking with you, you're comparing, as your listeners are, comparing what I'm saying to themselves. You can't not do it because the brain compares. It compares where we are to where we've been. That's how it stays safe. So we get put in a situation where we have no reference point. None of us have been, even if you've been in jail, it's a different reference point because you're now, and even if you're inside jail, it's a different reference point because the whole of society changed. There were a whole lot of rules that came in that we'd never been through before. So the brain went into a hyper state. Now, what's happened 4 years later is we've been in that hyper state still, and we've ignored the consequences of it. And you're seeing now the repercussions of that because we have a dry mouth most of our day, a headache that won't go away, random thoughts about our past, mood swings over our day, feeling overwhelmed is really common, panic attacks in the middle of the night happening with people who've never had panic attacks, having trouble getting to sleep, waking up 3 or 4 times a night. If you are, it's every 2 hours because it's the end of a REM cycle. What else? You think about something before you go to sleep, and you think about it right through the night, and you don't think you've slept. So this is the phenomena that's happening. Now, as a result of that, we're tired, we're confused. The brain is hyper vigilant at the moment. And it doesn't take much to make people snap. So you're seeing anger and aggression. Violence has increased 35% globally, only in places where lockdown was used. So it's that phenomenon. Now, coming back to what we're talking about there with the suicide, thoughts of suicide, that's increasing without a doubt. The stats don't reveal the truth at the moment, but yes, we're seeing that, and we're seeing. So basically, the brain, when we have fear, we can't see the future, we go into this hyper state, and that builds up and causes anxiety, and anxiety causes more fear. We isolate ourselves. Tachykinin is produced in the brain, which again causes more fear and more anxiety. So we isolate even further. And when that tachykinin takes hold, it causes paranoia. So you're seeing all sorts of unusual behaviors coming out from people because of that. It's worse than ever. Road rage, right? You've got it. Over there. Ram rage, you've got it.
Yes.
We got it. People stabbing, you've got it. We've got it. It happened to the UK. Happened in the United States. Now they all have guns, but no, they had stabbings. And I'm trying to work out why. This is the crazy thing about this is why are these patterns following? So in Australia, you're about 12 months behind the UK. So there's your guide. So we are about 18 months behind because we're about 6 months behind Sydney, Melbourne, as far as human behaviour goes. So, when I'm in the media, people go, how do you know this stuff? And in fact, one guy a media guy got me and did another interview, and he said, you said this would happen 6 months ago. What, have you got a magic ball? I said, well, actually, the truth is we just follow what's happening globally. So the stats are showing that perhaps it's not showing that people are fragile or having suicidal ideations or whatever. It only shows what they call completed suicides. So it's not the reality of what we are struggling, but we're managing to get through. So I get people to focus on just 6 things in their life at the moment. So we go to Maslow: food, shelter, sleep. Start eating better foods. Don't go for sweet and fatty foods. Go for foods high in serotonin. Serotonin's a mood lifter. Fix one thing each day. Tidy one thing at home every day, and you'll start to feel safe and secure. And then focus on sleep. And for those listening, we've got a free document that you can go and get off our website for that. And then focus on going back to the basics. We're social creatures, so talk, read, write. Talk with people more about how you're feeling. When you talk, you share, you get that bond, or you get all those good chemicals that oxytocin produce. When you've got something on your mind, talk about it, then read some information about what you've talked about, and then write yourself a plan. And the plan is to do one small thing each day to move forward. Remember, the brain is always moving forward. It's the only interest in our past is of bad things, unless we force it. So if you can do those 6 things, that gets us through it. Maslow nailed it in 1930s. That whole hierarchy of needs: food, water, shelter, air, sleep. So those 3 big ones in that bottom one, because when you get that base layer, you then feel safe and secure, which is the next layer. You then are able to connect with others, and connection builds your self-esteem, which then allows us to thrive. So there's nothing, it is clever, but all he did was watch human behavior. And he said, if we get this part right, the rest will flow. He nailed it. And we haven't changed.
No. People say you'd have, but we haven't. We're fundamentally the same. All right. You do currently a lot of work in leadership circles.
Yeah.
What's the qualities that are probably the most essential for leaders facing critical decisions or critical moments in a workplace?
Well, it's a bit like I just talked about. Good leaders help people help themselves, right? So you set the direction and you get them to come up with a solution. There's a great video done by Simon Sinek where he talks about Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela, his dad learned about leadership from his dad. That's why, he was a legend as far as leadership goes. You got to admit it, I think. And he said he watched his dad, and he talks about leaders speaking last, right? So if we take that with what I just said about helping people help themselves, we try to do too much. One person cannot have the solution. If we are, I'm going to be a bit naughty and say it's arrogance, right? When it shouldn't be arrogant enough. The best leaders I've ever had, particularly in the police, are those people that remembered you, remembered something about you, and asked you what you thought.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what leadership is. Sit back and don't do anything as a leader, right? We got to get there. How are we going to get there? Watch it go, and I'll have a little bit of that, and a little bit of you, and a little bit from you. We're going to do this. Nailed it.
The best leaders I've ever seen are the ones who hire appropriately people with skills and knowledge, and then say, what support do you need to do your job, and get out of the way and let the people do their bloody job.
Absolutely. Wind them up and let them go. Just every so often go, ooh, might want to rethink that one. Right? The captain's not standing at the wheel steering the ship, sitting back in the chair going, left.
Yeah. All right. Critical conversations where tension in the workplace is high. Any tips for negotiation and for, bringing a calmness in the workplace? Because I know a lot of workplaces these days are basically built on drama.
They are, and we're speaking our mind too quickly. Because we're all sort of under the pump, and businesses are changing. The way we work is changing. 5 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting here doing this, a podcast, looking at each other. It just wouldn't even be on our minds. And technology is changing things so much. And the thing about it is never say the first thing that comes into your head, right? Now, when you are negotiating in a business sense, come up with 3 things. Why do they need you? What value can you bring, right? And then how am I going to express that? And how can I leave them wanting more, sort of thing? So if we can break it down to those three things, right? Never go in too hard is another one. If you go in too hard, you're going to offend people. I deserve more. It's a bit like negotiating for a house. We'll go in really low. You're not going to be able to get that house because the owner's going to say, never deal with that person. That's insulting. So it's a bit like we talked about, right? So, but you've got to make them. What's your number one thing? So when I mentor people going into business. Three things people are looking for at the moment. No, the biggest one. Well, they want to know what you've done and what your academic qualifications are, if it's relevant. But the biggest one is, what's your point of difference? What's your point of difference, and why do they need that?
Yeah.
Why do you, if you're going for a job interview, look at the business that you're going into. What can you bring? That'll get you the job. They don't care about everything else you've done. It's what can you do? I used to go into job interviews and, well, they do that. You had to do it in the police. What's your experience? And you get all this big, long thing about how good you are. It's not about how good you are. It's how good you're going to be.
Yep.
Again, it's about the future.
Yeah, I wish I'd had those tips about 10 years ago. I remember walking into one place and I went, right, I deserve at least $20,000 extra. I bring you all this business, blah, blah, blah. And to be quite honest, they got offended. And I got offended that they got offended because I was speaking the truth, but maybe went a bit too hard, a bit too soon.
Yeah, if you go a bit too hard, a bit too soon, if you offend them, but you've got to do it in a way that connects with people, right? So it's and people say, "Oh, I'll go in cold because I'm at my best." Never go in cold, but don't over practice. So if I'm interviewed in the media quite frequently here now, and so I go in and I start the night before, and I look at about 5 or 6 things I want to say. And then I read it again and shorten it down to just 3 or 4 words for each point. The next day, when I'm going for the interview, I just look at those short, sharp, yep, got it. And then forget it. Leave it alone for about 15 minutes before the interview and don't look at it again. You've got enough in your brain there. And then it's natural, but you can remember. And if I think I really want to say something, the little trick I do is I write a word down on the inside of my hand. So you'll see me a bit like this. I'm sort of leaning forward now with my hands here. And if you watch it, you'll sort of see me look down as though I'm just rubbing my hand. What I'm doing is looking at the word. Right? So, and do that in an interview. Right? Do that in an interview. Just make sure you don't use an ink that when you shake their hand, it's going to leave
It rubs off
on their hand.
Oh, well done. All right, a couple of little questions just off the cuff because curious about background. I've got a little bit of a background, a small little background in enforcement and compliance matters. So this is just me speaking curiously. Okay. You've got a master's in basically
Terrorism.
Terrorism. Yeah, I've got a qualification similar. You try and tell people that, I've got a bachelor in terrorism. They go, what? All right. Just for those who don't know, because, they may have lived under a rock on that, and we don't hear about it a lot these days, I guess. What is the definition of terrorism according to you?
So it's an act that has a desire to cause a change in government policy. That's it. It's to influence the government in some way.
Okay.
And that's why governments globally have said we don't negotiate with terrorists to stop it. Because if you accede to it, if you agree to do something that somebody's demanded, it's copycat, right? And this, I'm old enough to remember, I'm really old enough to remember hijackings. Aircraft hijackings, and the first couple that they did, they took off to those countries. Next thing, there's this global phenomena when was it? Was it the 70s? 70s, yeah,
Yep,
of
yep. 70s and 80s, yeah.
70s and 80s, these hijackings, because they let a couple
Mm.
of them no. So in prisons when we're talking just we always say, the first thing we say is, well, we're not going to do that. You'll never convince a negotiator when you're talking with them that to agree. Give me a helicopter and $1 million. Well, what do you reckon the chances of that are, Tom?
Absolute zero.
Well,
Absolute zero.
go to that wonderful quote from I can't think of the name of it now. The Castle. Tell him he's dreaming.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
you're not going to get it. You're not going to
Yeah,
get it. You're just so yeah. It's like everything. It's just like I talked about before, right? It's about honesty. It's about openness. It's about showing your vulnerability. But it really it doesn't matter what you do in life. It's about being not so much agreeable with people, but certainly making them, I guess, what we're doing now, forming that social bond to get along with somebody. And if we can do a bit more of that, a lot of what we've been talking about won't happen.
yeah, yeah. In 2019, New Zealand had its own little event, and a significant event. I mean, we're talking about Christchurch, and we're talking about
Mm,
51 people dying
mm,
as a result of
mm.
it. And in anyone's language, that's significant. But Christchurch is not the biggest city in the world.
Mm.
How big a shake-up was that for New Zealanders in general?
Yeah, it was a hell of a shake-up, to be honest. I mean, it was probably there was more died in the earthquake in Christchurch. Christchurch has had a hellish time. They've had two
Mm,
big earthquakes. The big one, lots of people lost their life, but we had nothing like this before. And my studies from Charles Sturt University from Australia is in
mm,
terrorism, safety, and security. So
yep.
I used to train the negotiators for it. So I ran what's called the advanced negotiation team, and we'd train and we'd train and we'd train for all these sorts of situations, but nothing like, and you sort of say, well, it never happened. Well, it did,
Mm,
and it rocked the country to its socks. And I guess that was core. And the thing that came out of it all was it a terrorist incident? Well, it was labelled that, but what change was he wanting?
mm.
It was just
Yeah,
mass murder.
yeah, you can't see that it was
No.
designed to change any government policy at all.
So it was outside of. I think they extended it to say it was, because it was against a particular race.
Mm.
Sorry, it wasn't a race, was it? It was a religious
Religions,
at
yeah.
mosques. Yeah, at mosques. And I'll tell you what. So we had all been training that the terrorist, when they come along, will be from someone like Al Qaeda or ISIS or someone like that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Completely missed it. Dropped
yeah.
the ball completely. So I'm not sure how they got to the point where they said it was terrorism, but it was the fact of that it did rock, and it has changed the country. To be honest, I mean, the
Mm,
laws changed, the firearms rules changed. There's a whole lot of regulations that came in. So yeah, it did change, but to stop these things, and the country became more aware and more, I think, understanding of others, which is a good thing, right?
good,
So,
good, good.
there's a huge bond, a good, strong bond now between New Zealand and Islam.
Yeah.
We're more aware of the stuff. We're more open to it, and it really was a hellish thing seeing people and what happened and hearing about it. Yeah,
Okay.
so it did
Um,
change everybody, but seldom do you get to talk with. There's not been one successfully negotiated peaceful resolution to a terrorist situation.
yeah, yeah.
Somebody took me to task on that, said there was one on Ireland years ago, but I haven't found it during
Mm,
the IRA.
mm.
I haven't found it. So, yeah, normally you're just, as I said before, you're just, waiting till the forces get there, delaying for time, and then in they go and try and form a resolution like that. A bit like the Sydney Lint Cafe
Yeah.
type thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
much like that.
All right. Another question. I was just asking your opinion because things may have changed since you've been in the police force. Occasionally, just occasionally, we hear over here that there is significant gang activity in Auckland and particular, but in New Zealand in general. Is that actually a true reflection?
Uh, no,
Good.
no. I think we've always had gangs. They came through in the 60s and 70s, and they started in principle as the rural migration into urban areas for work in the country, and then it started from overseas, from around the islands, so Samoa, Tonga, islands like that, come across for workforce. Um, and so this is part of the terrorist studies that I did is that radicalization. So when we are isolated, feeling alone, caught between two worlds, perhaps, we
Mm.
look for people to associate with. I mean, we belong to the local club or whatever it might be because we want to associate with like-minded people as a species. That's what humans are. And so they formed gangs. So they've been around for a very long time. There were quite a few during the exchange with Australia of sending back quite a few people.
Yes.
And some of them were, I see some of them and I think, how, no link whatever to New Zealand, right? No link here. So they're isolated and alone and got a couple of $100, here you go, off you go, and make sure you look after
Yep.
yourself. Well, they're gonna go into crime, aren't they? And
Yeah.
so that sort of highlighted it. Now we're trying to take control of it, and the latest is the politicians have decided that gang patches, the banning of them, are and so that's what's driven the media attention now. Is how is that working out? And so that's why we're highlighting this. It has. I looked at the stats last month. It has caused an increase in gang membership through that because now it's seen as a challenge, I guess, for young people
Mm.
to be part of it. So, and it has been done in Australia before, hasn't it? And
That's
in
right. Yeah.
places like Sydney, but it sort of drives that underground. We've got to deal with them, and this is the start. That I think
Yep.
we've got to deal with them slightly differently. There has to be consequences. You can't let people go around doing what they're doing and intimidating. And
Yep.
they were intimidating. I mean, they were just the patch was an intimidation. So there'll
Yes.
be that's what the start of it. So yeah, we do have to. But is it you don't see them anywhere now? You feel safer, but the stats in 6 months will show whether we actually are safer.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point because when I think Queensland was the first state over here that did that banning of patches and it was a big question if is society any safer or are we just assuming because we don't have 300 people wearing the same jacket going down the street or down the road that we are safer. Um, I, I'm still in two minds whether I've actually seen any improvement in that whatsoever, but maybe.
Yeah, you got to look at the stats, right? So police have statistics. That's where you go to the police website. That's where I go to the New Zealand Police website, and they're honest about it. I'm quite surprised at some of the stats that I've seen. Or you can go to academia, to the universities
Mm,
that do studies on this, and those two places are where you go to actually see if you are. And that's one of the things I've been encouraging people to do. Are we safer, or do we just feel safer? Um, I know we feel safer. You can, and
mm.
a lot of people of my generation of the old baby boom, we were saying, yeah, great, but let's just see what's going to happen. So we've got a lot of youth crime here at the moment.
Mm,
So
mm.
we're going to have to change some laws there as well. But I was thinking about this the other day. So I always think think at the extreme end. So does jail, for example, does jail work? Well, um, it's tougher penalties. Well,
Yeah.
every crime that I know, violent crime, is not planned. So you think about extreme murder. Is a murder planned? No, it's a robbery and the person's died. Right? But because you committed an offence doing it, it's murder. Now, everybody else that's with you, because the law is section we have called Section 66, parties to an offence, everybody that was with you are also guilty. Now, you don't think about that at the time, right? And you don't know that that's what you're going to do. So I was part of an investigation. We locked up 4 people for murder. Only one was the principal, and he didn't tell anybody what he was going to do. He hit this poor bugger with a piece of wood and killed him. The other 3 are in. You're in for murder as well. And one of them's still appealing now. This is sort of nearly 30 years on, about 20 years on. He's appealing it. He needs to read Section 66. It says if you've agreed to commit a crime and somebody dies, you're culpable for that murder. So then that's why I always ask, and we know that 50% of murders themselves are crimes of passion, right? And the rest are crimes of anger or so they're unplanned. The violence has gone a little bit too much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't think there has to be consequences. You can't get away with this stuff. But how can we make people see the future of where they are right now? So we had this terrible thing with a senior sergeant and a few have been hurt, but she was killed. She's out patrolling and I don't know what to sort of call them, the words I want to call them, drove his car and killed her, drove into her, right? Terrible mum, wife, yes, great. In fact, she was one wing behind me, one recruit course behind me. And she's still on the job and I've been out for 11 years. And so the whole lifetime just snapped like that, right? And a young bastard has taken someone's life. Did he plan that? No, because how's he know he's going to be there? You see the thing. That's So we've got to think. We've got to either be really harsh, but even that, you look at America, look at Texas, right? So let's look at Texas. Death penalty. Kill someone, death penalty. Has that stopped murders? No. Has it reduced it? No. Because at the time, it's the lack of the people aren't in their prefrontal cortex; they're in the limbic system, right? And they are just thinking about what they can get out of this at the time. So it's a hellish time for us, and that sort of violence is really going up. The one thing that about gang patches, I always say, at least we know where the buggers are.
That's right.
You stand out, so at least you can see them. It's the ones you can't see, the ones you got to be worried about. And so when they travel in cars and not bikes, not motorcycles, and they travel without their patches, right? And that's the stuff. That's where the real mischief is happening.
Yeah. All right, Lance. Just to finish up, what services can you offer both to businesses and individuals if they want to contact you and get some help?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work at the moment around de-escalation of angry people. A lot of work on that, and we work on it's quite different to what others. I'm very lucky. I've fallen into the right thing, and I've been able to develop some really good techniques for de-escalation, personal safety. So I can do this on camera with you. I'm right in front of you in the middle. If I just go off to one side slightly, I'm not as confrontational as being directly in front. So coming up with simple techniques, step back 45 degrees, breathe out. Breathing out brings calm to the brain. So I show people how to control yourself, then to control other through both body language and that. But also people that are struggling. We have a number of courses on, we call it coping skills to support rather than resilience. Coping skills to support resilience. So we do a lot of coping skills. So a lot of work around controlled breathing. We shouldn't be doing any breathing techniques where we, in fact, I'm going to show you one. And everyone that's listening to this, they're going to do it. I'm going to get you to take a big deep breath through your nose, fully inflate your lungs, and I'm going to get you to sigh as hard as you can. Then I'll ask you a question. Big deep breath and go. Sigh as hard as you can.
Yep.
Now try and think of something. Pretty hard to do, right?
Yeah, it is. It's impossible.
So that's the stuff that we do. And now straight away you've cleared your head of all thoughts and you're good to go. So that's how you bring yourself back to the moment. You're going into a meeting. Before you get in the meeting, big sigh. Now all I want you to do is to breathe out as slowly as you can. If you do it now, no one knows you're doing it. Just breathe out slowly. Keep breathing right out, and now you'll be calm. When you breathe out, your heart rate goes down. When you breathe in, your heart rate goes up. When something goes wrong, we're wired to take a big deep breath to get the adrenaline and cortisol through. So do the opposite immediately. Breathe out slowly, and you'll be calm. You won't go into fight or flight. So that's the sort of stuff that we do as well.
Excellent. Lance, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, and I've certainly learned a lot. Somewhere down the track, somewhere in the future, could I get you back on again? Because I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours. There's a lot there to unpick.
It would be a pleasure too, Tom. I've enjoyed the chat as well.
All right. Thanks very much for your time today, Lance.
Great. It's been a pleasure, mate. Cheers.
This is Voices from the Edge.